I've actually worked with Chris. I had the good fortune of working with him on a project in Black & Decker, which was a lot of fun. If you ever need anybody who can figure out what the consumer is trying to tell you and they can't, this is the guy that can do that. So I'm working in the mobile tech space right now. I had a presentation that I was really kind of excited to do. I'd never done it. It was a brand new product that we're going to launch in the fall with some fantastic visuals. It's on a thumb drive somewhere in the rain. And so, and I didn't give it enough time to load up into box.com for me to pull down here. So even though I'm in mobile tech, I have absolutely no idea how to get my mobile tech working. My background, I did started with ear warmers. If you've ever seen an ear warmer that goes around the back of the head. Did marine base layer contracts, did gloves in Home Depot and Lowe's, sold just all kinds of different things. All of it patented or patent pending. Had fantastic teams. I've got about 50 some patents now. Some of them has value, some of those don't have value. I have started 4 different companies, drove one straight into a wall, made okay on another one, and did well on one. So I'm averaging right in the middle or a 0. I've got 2 businesses right now. One's in urban farming, so I'm doing organic leafy greens on whatever space we can find, hexavalent, chromium land, whatever. Selling into Whole Foods, restaurants, places like that. That's more of a mission-based business than a money-based business, speaking of margin. And then I'm doing mobile tech stuff with a different set of partners. And what I'm going to do, so I'll talk about this one product of a few that we've got, just as an example. And then what I'd love to do is, instead of talking about our process, is maybe talk about some secrets that I learned, or ways to fail fast and fail cheap, especially if you're going from a place you know very well to something completely new, which seems to be every business I ever do. I went from semiconductors to ear warmers to medical laboratory accreditation to e-learning and so on. So this process is something that I'm very familiar with. I've also blown a lot of money, and so the whole fail fast, fail cheap mentality of evaluating something and then pivoting as you go through that investigative process is kind of built into my DNA now. So, and I've had plenty of failure. So we're in the Apple stores in Best Buy, started about a little over 2 years ago, and came into this space, which is incredibly hyper-competitive. There are thousands of case companies, but we came into this space knowing we were selling in the case aisle of these stores, but we didn't feel like we were going to be a case. We felt like we were going to be an empowering a brand inside the space. Most case companies come in to look at a device and they think about protection and think about style. There's a little bit of function added in there, but it's really about making sure that your insurance policy when you drop this is in place, and then taking advantage of your personal brand, right? Hopefully there's something that connects with you and you can put that color. Obviously my personal brand is big and dull. We came at this and as we looked at the market, and this actually came from something odd, and this sounds like something that you may have done as well, where you just see an opportunity rather than have to go research and discover it. And there's so many different places in between those two where you can create something that can be really good. I've probably talked to 500 people with ideas over the last 20 some years, and probably 90% of them are good ideas. People, when I say that to them, they're like, "Oh, I should go do this." I'm like, no. And so I'm going to throw some things out here that would qualify that, and you've heard a little of this from both of them. How many folks in here do any type of physical product? How many people want to do physical products or have physical product ideas? Anybody in consumer products? Well, yeah. Besides Dad. All right. So most of my experience with product is in consumer products. So I'll be hovering. My answers are going to hover in that space, but hopefully you can find something that makes sense in your space, whether you're making an app or a piece of clothing or whatever. When we came at this space, the camera was not. This is 2.5 years ago when we first started thinking about it. The camera wasn't on the phone in front. And so the idea of video conferencing had yet to come out. But the belief was that it was. Everyone was buzz about this happening. The iPhone hadn't come out with that yet. And we said, well, when somebody's doing a video conference call, no one does those now because no one wants to be seen or see someone else. But if you're doing a video conference call, the last thing you want to do is be holding and aiming this thing over a period of time. So we thought you're going to need something to angle that, and it can't be one angle, it's got to be a whole bunch of angles, right? Wherever you are, you want to sit back in the chair, you want to sit up, you want to stand, whatever it may be. And then we also thought you could do movies. Same thing, you want a hands-free aim the screen edge. And every application that we saw that was out there that had some sort of stand, and there were 2 cases across the entire thing. Remember, there's no iPad at this time. This is 3 years ago. And everything that was out had a single angle in landscape rather than portrait. And so we figured, what about a multi-angle? So we came up with the number 11 because of the movie Spinal Tap. And decided that that was the right number of angles, because who knows what the right number of angles is, right? It's just double digits and then Spinal Tap 11. Does everybody know that? Anybody not know Spinal Tap, the movie? These speakers go through that?
It goes to 11.
All right, so we decided on 11 angles as a result of that, and we knew we could do anywhere from about 10 to 18. We came up with a rotating 11 angle, any orientation, built-in view stand. Everything we do has to kind of fold flat and go away, so it's not too much thicker than a regular case. We've made this hyper thin here. This happens to work with a smart camera. I'll show you why. Concept behind this again is, here, let's see if it works here, is I can essentially get rid of any glare. So I've got about a 4-degree difference here. I can change that just a little bit, and it gets rid of that glare, and I get to stay exactly where I want to be. I can also do a full up, and there's no case that does all these different things. You can do almost a full upright portrait. So if you're reading a book, relaxing, or doing that call or something. We also have a thumbprint inside here. This doubles as a handle, and so you can do videography. We've sold to 4 different school districts so far because they can use this for teaching. They can teach the students in a very relaxed mode without having to hold this 1.5-pound device like this. They can teach for a half an hour, and then when they're done, they pop this on the table, and the young kids, instead of hunched over with this in their lap because they can't see it on the table, they can stick it upright in whatever mode that they need to do that. We also sell to coaching staffs. So we have the ability to do their playbooks. Anybody who's in football right now knows that that market's going nuts on the app hardware combination and things like that. So this was for us, and I'll show you one other feature that this case demonstrates, or this case has. If I'm sitting in the airport or any place where I don't have a surface, tabletop surface, I can use that as a tabletop surface. Again, any angle, pop this off, portrait, I'm ready to do. So you've got what we call lap modes, table modes, and handle modes. This is an iterative process. We did not go through a very formal process. This is my business partner and I. He was my best industrial designer at 180s. And we just sat down. He's extremely fast in CAD and so on. We came up with this, prototypes and things. And I'll talk about some ways to kind of do that stuff very quickly. They hinted at some of them. And we started out with the angles, then we came up with the rotation, and then we started thinking about all the other usability issues that are there. But before we took this out of what I'm going to call duct tape and staples stage and did anything, and this is before 3D printing was inexpensive. There was plenty of these places you could go to, and we did a lot of SLA and SLS rapid prototyping. But at the very beginning, again, fail fast, fail cheap. So I'm going to transition, start using this as a backdrop for some of these points that I'd like to make, and I'm sure I'm going to get some response. So in the idea of fail fast, fail cheap, so it's draw something up. In our case, we were able to put it into CAD. We did some images, and the very first thing I want to know that is different than what I thought I wanted to know when I was first designing the ear warmer. When I first designed the ear warmer, I thought I'd better learn about patents. I've got to get over to China and find a cheap manufacturing source. I've got to do all these things that seem very intuitive, very, very natural to you when you're first creating a product. Those are the last things you need to do, right? Not in his case, but when I'm doing this product. I've got to figure out whether anybody gives a shit, right? First and foremost, there are 2 really important people in my market. Now, if the internet was what it was when I first started, I may have thought about this differently. There are plenty of companies not making consumer products, not selling through retailers, selling direct only or predominantly, and we do plenty of business there. But I needed to find out whether the retailer, as both gate and spy, can get me information quickly. And I'm going to explain both of those things. So in many cases, the best product doesn't get to the shelf. I've watched this over and over again. Sometimes it's not my product that's the best product, but I got to the shelf. Sometimes your best product doesn't get to the shelf. So they're the gatekeeper. And my space. So I didn't know the buyer at Apple, but I knew that if the Apple buyer was interested in this as gatekeeper, that would be important. Also, the Apple buyer is my spy. They don't know it, but they do the industrial espionage for me. And this doesn't violate any of the non-disclosure agreements or their relationships, but I can simply ask them, have you ever seen anything like this? The Apple buyer has seen everything. Everybody is trying to get into the Apple stores at the time, and everything was being made around Apple products. And so if that buyer had any interest, and that buyer could tell me that they had not seen anything like this, then that was what I needed to then take the next step. And that cost me almost nothing. I just kept making phone calls. I didn't know that buyer, but I knew lots of buyers. I knew how they thought and what they needed. And I asked everybody I knew. I went to a trade show and asked a distributor, anybody I could to get this person to call me back. I finally got an email, uncle, period. You can have 5 minutes, here's my phone number. So I asked him those questions, and I sent an image to him that didn't show how this worked. I just showed an image and I said, here's what it is. So from a patent standpoint, I did not divulge my inventive step. Another important thing here, right? You don't have to worry so much about NDAs and things like that. Put them in place where you can, but most distributors, retailers, other people, they're not going to sign NDAs. They have so much information that you need to glean. So come up with that, just enough information to get them to a place where their answer has value to you, where you haven't crossed the line of inventive step, and you can give a tremendous amount of information, and you can start to spread the net far and wide on information gathering. So I got this guy on the phone, and he was very pleasant, but, and ended up buying the product later. But he said, I said, I've got something that'll do multiple angles, I can tell him the number, and I can do it in any orientation. And he said, well, why do you need that? And I said, well, when you put the camera on the front of the phone, you're going to do this, and then you got this. He's quiet, and he said, well, what colors does it come in? And so that, again, my first answer is done. He's got some interest in this. And then I said, have you ever seen anything like this? And he said, oh, there's plenty of cases out there with stands. And I said, have you seen any case that does more than a single angle at 45 to 52 degrees? No. Have you ever seen a case that does portrait and landscape? No. Okay, that's all I need. Thank you. And he was like, that's it? That's it. And so I said, I'll be back in touch when I have a product. And he said, great. And so the next time I contact him, I pulled a Babe Ruth, right? I pointed at the fence. And if I execute, bring the product back, I'm instantly credible with this person who knows I have absolutely no background in this industry. Do the same thing with your investors at the exact same time. Anybody that you know that might give money towards what you're doing, you go pitch them at that exact same time. You think, all I got is duct tape and paper clips, right? Fantastic. Pitch them at that moment. I point the bat at the fence, I'm going to the fence. If you fail, they don't, the Apple buyer's never going to see me again. So nothing lost, right? And so that's one of the other things. You made a comment that's really important, that you see a convergence of people coming up with the same idea at the same time. This is fact. I don't know about what you're doing, but because you're really leaning into a lot of really cool things. But I don't think I've ever created in any space where there isn't a competitor weeks before or weeks after. And that's because we're all not that smart. Right? We're just not that smart. We are all taking advantage of a confluence of facts, capabilities, and opportunities that are coming together at the same time. And there's a lot of smart people around the world. And the way the internet is working, obviously now, people are coming up with stuff at around the same time. So moving fast is really important. The nice thing is, you'd ask the question about, is it harder or easier? My answer would be it's both, which is probably what Chris is thinking. It is easier because you have things like inexpensive rapid prototyping and the ability to connect up with an e-commerce solution in a warehouse in a BAM and manufacturing in China. It's like this now compared to when I started. The ERP systems, the MRP systems, CRMs, like all this cloud-based code to launch your company is all sitting out there. Access to money, Baltimore Angels, none of this stuff existed. I went to Wharton for grad school and they had $50,000 to give away to entrepreneurs. The #1 entrepreneurial management MBA school in the country, $50,000. Now I'm dating myself by saying that, but there's a lot more now, but it's now, everything is sitting there. There is capital, there's capability, there's people. The issue is that everybody has access to that, so the whole thing's faster. And then depending on the space you're in, like the space I'm in, if I compare this to an ear warmer, it would be like the ears change shape and location every year. So imagine what that does to your design cycle, your inventory problems, on and on and on. Imagine the terror that puts in the mind of the Best Buy buyer who's looking at your product going, it's really cool, but when are they revving that device? You know, and so this is a very fast-paced industry, and I think so the pace of things seems to be a lot faster, and the number of competitors all trying to do things seems to have ratcheted up, in my opinion. But you yourself can do all those individual activities faster. One other thing is intellectual property. So I'm a big patent hound. In fact, multiple strategies. I'm going to hit on them really fast. If anybody wants to talk about this afterwards, I can. But use design patents as utility patents. So if I'm the first, design patents $300, utility patents $5 to 25 grand, and the cost of pursuing them around the globe, the cost of defending them, a couple $100 grand versus 15, 20 grand, depending on just prosecution. So if I'm the only case ever to have a circle inside of a rectangle, and you can't rotate anything other than a circle, then I just need to put a design patent together on a circle and a rectangle for mobile devices. I don't have to put together all the hip bones connected to the leg bone, right? I don't have to do this stuff. I'm going to do that anyway because I want the utility patent as well. But as you're coming up with ideas, think about how shape captures function. And if you want to talk about that again, I'm happy to talk to you about that. That has been important for me. So you can look at patents at the end there as an inexpensive way to create protection. But in the very beginning, the research that Chris was talking about is extremely important. So just making sure that you're not an infringing party on somebody else, or that you're just not wasting your time. So coming in with good research and knowing what's already out there, patents are a treasure trove of ideas. Fantastic. Someone comes to me with an idea and I'm like, two things, and I'm going to talk about the next one in a second. Trade shows and the PTO, Patent and Trademark Office. Whether you use Google Patent Search or the USPTO search or whatever. It's go out, take your idea, search the internet with every possible Boolean combination of words that you can to try to find out what's out there. Do the exact same thing, and this is what people don't do, on one of these patent searches. Google Patents is very easy to use. Go on there and put every keyword search in customer use, everything you can, and then leave and come back and do it 3 days later and try a whole different set of words. And once you start finding any patents that have a relevance to what you're doing, you can look at the predecessors and the antecedent applications from that. It's all sitting right there. You can click right through. You can see what they said was kind of like what they were doing. And then you can see what referenced them on what they said that's even newer than the patent that you found. And so you can get a tremendous amount of things. You'll get ideas from manufacturability to 5 or 6 other concepts. I guarantee you whatever you create or file will modify and change dramatically and very positively. I even throw those into the charrette or the design, the iterative design process. Throw in applications that look like they're stopping some things. Trade shows as a university. So me, again, I'm always going into new industries, right? So anybody in here who has an idea that's just different than what they're normally doing, the trade show is the fantastic fail fast, fail cheap educator and connector. You go to the trade shows. Who's at trade shows? Who's been to trade shows? Okay. Trade show. You go there, besides having sore back, feet, and you drink too much, and you eat bad food. Everybody that you need to know, if I'm new, I'm going into this business. I go to the Consumer Electronics Trade Show, which is what I did. Go to the trade show, spend 3 days, find any brands or companies that seem to have like a brand that may fit this, and that's really important, not just the functionality or the capability. And then also, is anyone doing something that might be similar, or at least someone that understands the problem that you're trying to solve for the consumer, right? And then walk into that booth and say, hey, I've got like a couple ideas here. I don't really want to talk about them, but you guys have such a great set of things. Is your designer here? The designers are there, and they are unfiltered. And they have such a strong desire to talk to you because they're behind the door and they don't get to talk to anybody. They're not the salesperson. So they just throw up all over you about these things. And you can, again, show them your just prior to inventive step to them and get a tremendous amount of information. You want to talk to the salespeople, the distributors, the reps. They're all sitting in there, right? You can say, well, who's your best rep in the East Coast? Or wherever. Who's your best rep that calls on Apple or whatever else? almost every time they will tell you who these people are. Almost every time they're either in that booth or have to come by that booth every once in a while. Where are you building this stuff? Can you connect me with a manufacturer's rep that could have brought you, if you didn't have your contacts, that could take you and source your product for you? They're all sitting there. And if you find the right people, and you will, if you go to 3 or 4 different booths, some one person in there will take you under their wing. They'll like you for some reason. And they will give you all these contacts and all this information, and all you need is a couple of beers per person. A glass of wine, whatever. All manufacturers, reps, salespeople, distributors, and so on, they all drink. Every one of them. It's a prerequisite for the job. I'm joking. But it is an easy way to say, can I buy you a drink or a coffee or whatever? Sit down with them and get this information. And so what you'll walk out of there, and by the way, there's always the Taiwan area, the China area, the whatever area that you think this makes sense. Someone will funnel you there. You'll be able to walk through there and you'll see a person that makes 16 different types of plastic bits, that does whatever, circuit boards, whatever it may be. And you can say, have you ever done anything like X, and get a whole bunch of information. Or you can look at something and say, wow, that's a lot. It's really similar to what I'm making from a size and complexity standpoint. How much is that in a quantity of 1,000? Talk about price points, right? And you start to get this back. Well, how much is the tooling that I would have to spend to get? They have these answers like this. Or they'll take your card, give you a quote, they all take you seriously. So you can walk away from that, again, trade show as university and consultant. One thing I didn't talk about. So right when you first start, and I'll end here, I've got too many of these. Write the press release for your product before you create the product. There's no better way to do 2 things. One, that is put a focused point of light out that you're actually walking towards. Because what happens when you start creating, you start going, well, if I put this on here and put that on there and take a couple of these and snap on a couple of these, and all of a sudden you've got this kludgy thing, right? You need a point of light, a very specific thing that you're trying to go achieve. It also helps to keep what I call creative vibration out of the design team. So you want the design team to conflict, right? You want everybody to be coming at this from a different set of boxes and perspectives, but you don't want that conflict to be without a common purpose. And so if you've written the press release and someone goes, well, I really want it to levitate, and you say, well, wait a minute. Here's the press release. As cool as that is to create around, that's not what we're going to create. That doesn't have the features. And the great thing about a press release, in your press release, you write features, you talk about how it compares to the market, right? Do a little of this, how it fits in with who you are, everybody gets an idea of where you're going. And so it can be a really good guide, and it's only a single-page document if it's done well. And if you write the press release and it's 4 or 5 pages, keep working on it until it's 1 page, and then you've got a good point of light. And I will stop there. I do have a case, by the way, if anybody wants an iPhone 5 case. We sell these in the Apple Store. Oh, here's a cool product we're coming out with. So this is a bumper case with the stand built in. And it's because the iPhone 5S is supposed to be colored. And so there's a couple of other phones that are coming out, so we're trying to let the case color show through.
No thumb drive necessary.
Yeah, the images would have been much.
I'm glad you lost it.
So how do you control your passion? You seem to be off into a wide variety of candidates, and oftentimes I am. How do you focus and pick one and actually do it?
I get hit every day by my wife. Yeah, my wife would have a lot of affinity for that question. So when I'm between things, I'm evaluating a lot of things. My free time is all about reading and talking, listening. So I have my fingers in a ton of different things. I'm on a lot of different other people's boards and groups. And if somebody ever says, "Do you want to, sit down and create with us or do something else?" If I have that time, I will take that time just because it's fun and interesting. But once I pick something like the farming company that I'm doing, I spent 6 months putting that together, writing the business plan, getting some funding, getting the first farm going, and then I stepped away. And I took almost all the equity of the company and gave it to other people to run it. And so it's totally impossible to start 2 companies at the same time. So I had about 6 months where I was doing both of these at the same time, which is totally untenable. So that's one of my flows, but among many. But I focus. I do 95% of my time is on this company. So I use my free time, I guess, and I try not to pollute my work time.
If you said your name, I missed it. Can you tell
Oh.
us your name and the name of your product?
Sure, Brian Le Gette, and the company name is ZeroChroma. I didn't say it. And the products are all a bunch of different names based on the device and so on. The stand is called the theater stand. ZeroChroma, no color, is our design philosophy. So we don't think about whether it's shiny pink or covered with rhinestones before we figure out how to make it better or read better. Good question. I should have led with brand. That's what happens when you have no overheads.
At what point do you determine what success looks like for your company?
Success. Success for me will be selling, giving a great return for my investors, and the company continuing to do well afterwards. So I've got a very...
By which you mean acquisition or like what's...
there could be all different ways for that. So I would guess that it would be a strategic sale, not a financial sale. I'm certainly not going to be going public. It depends. There's a bunch of verticals that we're just getting into with Apple's help in healthcare and sporting goods. I have another whole line of product coming out that's about attachments. So we're going from, and this may be where this happens. We're moving from hands-free, which is what all of our stuff does right now, towards wearable tech, which is the real reason why I got into this business. And so I have this case, several of these cases will open up and attach onto arm straps, bicycles, and a bunch of other things, all connecting in with this base stand. And so we're doing wearable and sporting goods with a brand, one of the large sporting goods brands, and under their name. And then we're getting into healthcare and education with other connected means. So I've got one of these iPad cases is coming out with a detachable lid. Unlike this, it's not magnetic. Actually slides off. I have keyboards, keyboard options, and it can actually attach onto the back of a very simplified headrest on the back of the seat. Very simplified under the counter mount in the kitchen. And then we've got healthcare mounting options over the patient in the doctor's office, blah, blah, blah. So we're all using the exact same case, and I'm just creating separate mounts. So, and then eventually, hopefully over the next 4 or 5 years with Siri, sorry, it's a long answer, and I'll be right there. Siri, eye tracking, and gesture recognition, if everyone's familiar with Leap Motion on the gesture recognition. Eye tracking, LG and Samsung and a few others are doing some things where if you look down the bottom of the phone screen, it scrolls automatically, recognizing your eyes. The screen dims and gets brighter based on whether your eyes are on the screen or not. Tip of the iceberg, Leap Motion, the gesture recognition thing is a human hair turning or three-dimensional movement, and it can recognize and control what's going on the screen. 12,000 app developers working on that device right now. It's going to sell for $79 through Best Buy. Going to change everything. So those two things, along with really good voice recognition, are going to remove the need for the keyboard faster than I think I'm going to be able to guess. And that's really going to make wearable and hands-free extremely important. So that's where we're headed. I think when we're at a stage where a bigger company, a strategic, can see that and say, there's 20 patents in here that have lots of life, that can do all kinds of different things in the space, I'm going to pull them in, hopefully.
So, yeah, sorry, my hand was up because I wanted to make sure this is involved. I think you mentioned earlier on, you also have a more sort of mission-based company, where the goal is less...
Big City Farms.
Okay. So, yeah, how do you sort of balance those in terms of like companies that you think are supposed to be more about returns versus like identifying a mission that you really want to see?
That seems like a long answer because of time
we can
constraints.
time.
Is that all right if we finish it afterwards?
You should talk anyways.
Yeah.
You don't have like a 10-second thing. I'm just kidding.
I'm balanced. I'm constantly out of balance. So I would, or maybe I'm in balance when I'm out of balance. I like having a lot of competing things, and I'm actively negotiating with myself on what I'm going to spend time on. When I take investment capital, I am fully focused on that specific thing, and what I do is I take from my free time and these other things. So the Big City Farms thing is not part of my business time, if that makes sense.
just unplug it.
Okay, so